Hey, North Dakota, Rob Port here from Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics.
And I'm Chad Oban. We want to hear from you. We're giving away $100 to one lucky listener who takes our new listener survey.
It's quick, it's easy, and it'll take you less than 3 minutes to complete.
Just head on over to plaintalksurvey.com by October 20th. Share your thoughts and you'll be entered for a chance to win.
That's plaintalksurvey.com by October 20th. Help us make Plain Talk even better, and you could get free cash.
Thanks for listening to Plain Talk. Now let's get back to today's episode.
Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay. I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Today, we're going to have the last of our debates of the 2024 election cycle here on Plain Talk. We've done a lot of them. We've covered that, and I guess we haven't done debates on all the measures, but we've had discussions about all the measures at the very least. We've had a couple of debates. We've also had debates with most of the top of the ticket races. This one's an important one. The superintendent race in North Dakota occupies a little bit of a strange spot in that it's not partisan, but we do often see the candidates seek partisan endorsements. This time around, we had 4 candidates earlier in the cycle, and that's what happens is essentially candidates put themselves on the primary ballot, but it's not a partisan primary. Essentially, it's a winnowing. We had 4 candidates. The top 2 candidates advanced to the general election. Those 2 candidates are here with us now. One is the incumbent, our current superintendent, Kirsten Baesler, who's been in office since 2012. And the challenger is Jason Heitkamp. Jason is a former state lawmaker. He's a truck driver as his day job. He served as a lawmaker in the state senate in District 26 from Wahpeton. From 2021 to 2022, he was elected in the 2020 election cycle. It was a short term because of redistricting. After redistricting, Jason didn't win re-election. All that having been said, we're going to start out. Then I'll start out with my traditional first question for the candidates, and we'll start with the incumbent. Kirsten, you've been in office since 2012. That's a while. In fact, I think you are you? I think you're the longest serving statewide elected official at this point. Why should North Dakota voters give you another 4 years?
Because I've accomplished a lot in the last 12 years. We've reduced the number of employees at the Department of Public Instruction by nearly 20%, going from 101 employees down to 82. But I will say our job satisfaction is at its all-time highest. We have Gallup polls that are conducted by all state agencies every fall, and we were the highest rated aid agency this last fall. We'll conduct another one, but in 2023, we have high job satisfaction. We have a great team of people. But that job reduction or that number of reduction has saved taxpayers millions of dollars. And our ratings with our schools and the taxpayers and our constituents are at an all-time high. So I think that we have done some really great, significant things. We've increased our graduation rate for our Native American students from 51% in 2012 up to nearly 80% in 2024. That's significant. And why does that matter for us as a state, as North Dakotans? It matters because we're a very small state. There's only 780,000 people in the entire state. Workforce is an issue in every sector of our economy. And Native American students are 11% of our student population, nearly 11% of our student population. And when you are a state that has 11% of their students graduating at 50% the rate, you're not contributing to the economy in the way that you're supposed to. And so we are a service agency that is providing better service than we ever have before, and our student outcomes are on the rise. I think that there's a lot of conversation about how our students are actually doing. I think we'll get more into that as this debate goes on, as this conversation goes on. But the one thing that I want to say is a lot of people are maybe beating up on how our students are performing in the state. And I just for curiosity's sake, as that conversation started, I went back and I looked at 45-year-olds when they were eighth graders. How were they performing on the NAEP test back when they were eighth graders? Chad, I think that might be your class. I'm not sure if it is or not. But it's interesting to see that on the NAEP test in the 1993-94 school year, 36% of our students in eighth grade were performing on proficient level on eighth grade math. And so last year it was 37%. So we're not, and that's after a pandemic. So for all of those that are out there saying, they're just not learning the way that we learned, and they're not, I'm gonna call that what it is. So that's not accurate. That's not true. So that's the reason.
All right. Well, thank you for calling out how old Chad is. Always enjoy that.
I actually appreciate that because she had me 3 years younger than I actually am.
There you go.
Chad is an old man. Jason, I guess not the same question, but similar question to you. Why should voters choose you instead of the incumbent?
Well, I appreciate you guys having this debate, Rob. I just want to tell you that, when you talk about a truck driver, my truck actually runs on 23 satellites when we're in Florida, and it runs on 13 satellites here. So I just don't drive a normal truck, just so you know.
Yeah. Okay, great.
But I just wanted to go over, because I had an opening statement. My name is Jason Heitkamp. A lot of people don't know who I am, so I just wanted to talk about that. I've served in many different areas of local and state government, including 2 city councils, economic development for Richland County through the Job Development Authority, been a county commissioner before, and I actually won the CPAC award for the second highest ranked conservative in the North Dakota State Senate when I was in the 67th legislative session. Now, you were talking before about a nonpartisan position. I am the only candidate this year that actually was running as a nonpartisan. In fact, the Democrat Party and the Republican Party refused to have me talk because I would not seek letter of support from either of them. So that's why I wasn't at either of the conventions this year. So I am the only nonpartisan person that's running in this race this year. During the 67th legislative session, I put forward the biggest property tax reduction bill in the history of the state, which would have put us back onto what our founding fathers authorized in 1889. Article 8, Section 1 talks about establishing and maintaining schools, and that's state-related. Article 8, Section 2 talks about paying 100% costs of the common schools as a state obligation. And it's funny because Merrill Pepcorn actually brought that up in a debate on the Joel Heitkamp show the other day, that he believes that we should be funding schools through the state at 100% and that it is a state obligation. Article 10 talks about how state obligations cannot use property tax for funding purposes. And that's why I put that bill in, which caused quite a bit of stir in the Senate and actually led to my being districted out. That's in fact why I was redistricted out. And I was told that by our majority leader at the time. On day one, we're going to make a plan to follow all the century codes. We have some century codes that are not being followed right now. We're going to begin to close this funding gap from 80% paying for the common schools to 100%. We're going to use the available benchmarks to focus on outcomes to address efficacy and deficiencies in our present North Dakota education system. And we will use the ACP for juniors only, so we can actually measure how students are doing statistically as per the North Dakota Century Code, which is not being followed right now because they're using 3 to 5 different tests right now, which cannot be statistically used. And I'm going to also introduce a scholastic hotline as an avenue for whistleblowers who want to blow the whistle on what's happening in our state. I will use these 5 points to build a consensus to significantly improve public education in North Dakota in a short amount of time. We cannot afford another 4 years of what's happening in our state.
Kirsten, it looks to me like you might want to respond to some things that Jason just said.
So there's a lot there. Jason was a legislator for a year or a term, and there's a lot of what he talked about that he could have done when he was a legislator or attempted to get done. But even the bill that he talked about, he withdrew, and so it's interesting.
I did not withdraw that bill. I did not withdraw that bill. That is not true.
Okay.
No, I did not, Kirsten. That bill was killed in the Senate.
Oh, okay. Point made. Let's let Kirsten finish her statement, and then Jason will let you respond as well.
So I think that there is, he cites the Constitution a lot. And I think one of the things that is critically important is that in the Constitution, I believe it's Article 4, Section 2, it states that the Superintendent of Public Instruction has only the authority given to it by the North Dakota legislature. And so with that being said, that is my job to implement the laws and the regulations of both our state and federal expectations. And I think that it's important to also address what he just said about the tests that we use. And I think it's very important for our school leaders, for our community members, for our taxpayers to know exactly how their students are doing. And that is why I advocated for and was able to get the North Dakota legislature agree to allow us to put up insights.nd.gov, a public dashboard of explaining exactly how our students are doing. Can our students do better? Absolutely, they can do better. Do we want all of our students, 100% of our students, reading on grade level, writing on grade level? But the claim that is being made that we're using 5 different tests is simply not true. It is simply not true. Our North Dakota schools, 3rd grade through 8th grade, give the North Dakota State Assessment. This year, they're giving the North Dakota A+. Why has there been 3 different tests in the 12 years? It's because our standards need to be updated. Students expect, families expect that our schools are providing an education that are preparing our students for the future. That is a very critical thing. And so every 5 to 7 years, our North Dakota teachers come together in their subject areas, and they decide what our students should know and be able to do to prepare them for their future. Not our past, but their students' future. And so when we have new standards, we need to have an assessment, a test that is aligned to those expectations. We can't give an outdated test for the sake of giving the old test or the same test again and again and again. We need to give an assessment that is aligned to the expectations of today's students.
Jason, we'll let you respond, and then we'll move on to a question.
Century Code 15.1-21-09 talks about you need to have a test that compares school to school, grade to grade, gender to gender, age to age. Now, just 18 hours ago, I posted a couple schools from Insights. Bow Hall uses work keys and the ACT. Montpelier, no data available. Napoleon uses the NDSA. Ned Rose uses the NDSA. I can go on and on that there is not one test being used. Kindred uses work keys in the ACT. Calm uses work keys in the ACT. Unless you use the same test in each school, you cannot statistically look at how the children are doing. That has been a point that I've made. We are not following Century Code.
So I'm sorry, that's just simply wrong. That is simply inaccurate. Because a school provides the opportunity for their student to take an ACT test and a work keys test does not mean that that is the assessment that we use for comparability. They take the
That's what's on Insights. That is what is on Insights.
So if you look, you will also find the North Dakota State Assessment results for those school districts as well. We put as much information on North Dakota Insights as we possibly can. If a school district provides the opportunity for those schools to take the ACT, those students to take the ACT, and that's what we pride ourselves on. I'd like to make an open call to all of our listeners, all of your listeners out there. If there's something on that you want to know about our schools and it's not on Insights, let us know if it would be helpful. Parents are making decisions about where they should buy a home, where they might move to work. We want this dashboard to be as publicly available as possible. So if you'd like to sit down and I can walk through where you can find the North Dakota State Assessment Insights or on Insights for all of our school districts. But yes, and you can sit down with us, and it's about a 2-week exercise that our entire team goes through. So we are ensuring that it is gender to gender, grade by grade, and subject by subject, where we are comparing all the schools. It's our job, and that's what we do.
Let's Jason, 30 seconds, and then we really need to move on to a question.
I'm good, Rob.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, Chad, go ahead.
Yeah, so Jason, we heard a little bit about your background, and one thing that I didn't hear in that background was any sort of background in public education. Can you talk about if you've been an educator or a principal or a school board member? Did you serve on the Senate Education Committee? And after that, just maybe talk about why you, not Kirsten, but why you to fill this spot. That's very important. I mean, Rob and I both have kids in public schools. I love my kids' public schools, but this is a very important job. And so what makes you qualified?
You know, the thing is, people talk about my background in the Senate. I was only there for 2 years out of a 4-year term. I came with 6 bills and 1 resolution ready to go. All right. I was put on to the political subs committee, and I was on judiciary, and we were very busy. But I can tell you what, I was very involved in trying to learn the process of education and how it all works. And one thing we were always told was don't bother Senator Shively because he's very busy. But I did bother him. And if I would have had another 2 years in the Senate, I would have been working on the education parts. All right. And I said, that, the freshman class of senators, which we had 5, one of them is now deceased. But they had no bills that they brought. They had no resolutions that they brought. And I was actually told by Senator Wardner that, well, I guess we're not going to have to teach you anything. And that's real. When I came there, I was ready. And I was working on the things that I wanted to work on. And the one thing was I wanted to make sure that we did not use property tax for schools because that's against the state constitution. And so when I got redistricted, that is when I decided to run for superintendent of public instruction because I did not see any of the candidates that were running, including Kirsten, that I felt were going to fix the problem of the schools. I have always been very close with the Weimar School when my kids were in school. I taught 5th and 6th grade girls and boys basketball as a volunteer. I drove school bus. I was involved, but I was not on the school board because we had good people that were on a school board there at Weimar. So there's no reason to be involved in that. I was actually county commissioner at the time. And so actually, when Kirsten was first elected for superintendent of public instruction, I actually took her around in Richland County. We went to Hankinson in the morning, and we went to Weimar in the afternoon because they had the Blue Ribbon School Award. Weimar's actually had the Blue Ribbon School Award twice in the last 12 years. So when you ask why I wasn't on the school board, there's no reason to get onto the school board when it's a great school board. I was actually working on other things. So I've always been involved. I've always been involved with my children's education.
Kirsten, what is your background in education beyond being the superintendent of public instruction the last 12 years?
Thank you, Chad. I appreciate that. I want to point out that the Supreme Court has actually heard the case about whether property taxes is unconstitutional for public schools. And in that they did not find that it was unconstitutional. So I want to put that to bed. I don't believe or claim to believe that I know more about the Constitution and what our state Supreme Court is. And so let's just put that to bed. That case has been heard, and the Supreme Court.
You know what year that was?
So
here it was.
So here is my answer to the other question about what my background is. I too have been really engaged in my children's education, but beyond that, as the PTA president for Fort Lincoln Elementary School for 12 years, then being a teacher's aide, thinking that I was going to go to law school and get a law degree. I started working as a teacher's aide, and that's when I fell in love with education. So I began that work in my early 20s, and I started that work and stuck with the education career because there was the realization that is how you profoundly impact our state and our nation and our world, one child at a time, one classroom at a time. So I started out as a teacher's aide, then became a classroom teacher, went back to school, got my master's degree in education and library science, and so was a school librarian for a number of years, was an assistant principal at 2 schools here in the Bismarck system. And so I worked for 24 years for the Bismarck Public School System. In addition to that, as a engaged community person, I wanted my children's school in Mandan. I was working in Bismarck. I wanted my children's school to be the best school that it could possibly be. I'd been involved in Mandan's economic development, was a library board of trustees. And so I threw my hat into the ring and was a school board member for nearly a decade. I served on the Mandan school board for 9 years, was president of that board for 7 of those 9 years. Very proud of a couple things during that tenure as a school board member. We went from one of the poorest performing Class A school districts in the state to one of the highest performing. The year before I took this office, Mandan Public Schools had beat every other Class A school on the state assessment, except for one high school located across the river from us with a completely different demographic than Mandan High School. They beat us in science that year. And so I would say that the results of that occurred because as a school board member, as a school board leader, prior to that board that was sitting that received those scores, the board was fighting with its teachers every year in and year out. And the contract negotiations broke down, I think, for 4 negotiation cycles in a row. Our teachers in Mandan had to go to impasse. And when you have, it's where I first coined the saying, when big people fight, little people suffer. And when we were focused as a community, as a school board, on adult problems and adult issues, we were taking our eye off the ball of what our students needed. And when you take care of those adult issues and you become adults and you sit at the table and you negotiate with good faith, you solve the funding problems, you solve the working condition problems. That is where you really can get back to the mission of what public schools is all about. And that is making sure that our 3rd graders can read, our 8th graders can do math, and our students are graduating choice ready with the knowledge, the skills, and the attributes, the disposition to do whatever they choose to do, whether it's military, college, or work. And so when I was approached to take that same type of support and leading to the state level and run for state superintendent, I thought, wow, I was able to impact 3 people's lives as a paraprofessional, as a teacher's aide, 25 students live in a classroom, 300 students in a building as an assistant principal, and then 11,000 students as a school board leader. I wanted to take it to start to impact 131,000 students' lives in the state.
One question that I wanted to ask you both, and Jason, I'll start with you, is the question about attendance. I think that's become a hot issue, particularly since the pandemic, and we saw all that our state and our country went through, and in particular, the schools. I was certainly a parent at home trying to fill in the role of being a teacher on the fly, in addition to working my own job and everything else. But since the pandemic, we're hearing increasingly that we have an attendance problem at our schools. So Jason, if you were to be elected superintendent, would this be an issue that you would seek to tackle, and what steps do you think you could take to address it?
I think that, one of the biggest things that your question doesn't ask for also is, what about the kids that can stay on the rolls up until they're 22 years old? Where is their attendance at? They're allowed to come back into the school, from what I understand, and eat and be a part of the day, although that they have not graduated. This is one of the reasons why I understand that the graduation rate is actually better than it should be. I'd like to find out where their attendance is for the day. But attendance is truancy, okay? And we have to get to a point where we start understanding what truancy means. And when you're not there, that's going to be a problem. And we're going to take care of it.
Well, drill down on that a little bit, because when you say truancy, I mean, if I'm remembering right, I think that's a crime under the criminal code in the state. So are you talking about
It's a crime. It's a crime. Okay. It's a crime. Okay. And it's something that we're not following the century code on. That's another century code.
So are you saying like law enforcement involvement with I guess truant truant students, encouraging law enforcement intervention.
Rob, do you know who the head of the school resource officer program is in the state of North Dakota?
I don't off the top of my head, no.
Superintendent of Public Instruction. They are in charge of making... No, it's not. I just took my Class 1 conceal and carry permit, and the Superintendent of Public Instruction okays the policies for the School Resource Officer program. So if you are okaying the policies, then you are in charge of it. Just like with the schools that are going through with these bond measures, you have to approve the construction also. So if you're not approving the construction, then that is wrong also. So you are in charge of a lot of things, Kirsten, that you may not even know of.
So I'm going to...
Let Jason finish.
I just took my conceal and carry permit because I got to take that every 5 years because I have a Class 1. And right in there, it talks about how the Superintendent of Public Instruction is in charge of the policies of the SRO program. So that means you're in charge.
All right.
So I think we're talking about, I think he's conflating things or confusing things. So SRO stands for School Resource Officer. What he's talking, right? But what you're talking about is the Armed First Responder Law. And the Armed First Responder Law created the policies of a school employee that a school board authorized to have a weapon on the school premises. So the Armed First Responder Policy and Administrative Rules is part of the responsibility of the Department of Public Instruction. To date, we have had only one school in the state, and it wasn't a public school. We've had one school in the state exercise the authority given to it by the legislature, where its board authorized the armed first responder. But Rob, I'm going to address the attendance issue.
Yeah,
I know that Jason never really addressed that. He talked about truancy. Truancy is all attendance, and absences are not truancy. And so you're right. You're exactly right. The attendance issue is an increasing challenge, and we've seen it spike since COVID. And what we're hearing from principals, what we're hearing from legislators, hearing from their constituents about their school districts is that, yes, attendance is an issue. And so truancy is where there's chronic absenteeism, where a student simply isn't going to school and there's no excused absence and no one has called and informed the school and they're simply being defiant. And we track the chronic absenteeism. Every state in the nation is required to do that. Chronic absenteeism is defined very specifically as more than 10 absences in a school year. That rate is going up. But what we're tracking right now is the attendance issue, where actually mom and dad are calling in and saying, our student will not be there. We are going to go on vacation, or we are going to take a long weekend. And so the attendance issue is also a problem. Our absenteeism is going up. So what will I do? It's what I've already begun to do. We need to drill down to find out what are the differences between those attendance issues. What are causing those absences? Is it lack of engagement? How can we make that school day more engaging? Is it lack of value or priority in a school, in a family? What can we do to get the family understanding how important it is to go to attend school? Is it lack of transportation? Is it because there are, such a woeful lack of childcare availability and access for the family? Are some of our older siblings needing to stay home for mom and dad to go to work? We need to find out, and I would imagine that it's all of the above. I would imagine that some of those reasons are more prevalent in some regions or some areas of our state, and the solutions will be different. But me imagining what is causing that isn't the answer. We cannot just blatantly scattershot a bunch of money and a bunch of solutions that we think might hit the target. We've got to be intelligent and deliberate about this. So working with a couple of legislators, both in the House and the Senate, to draft a bill that would allow the department to partner with a research institution in the state to actually find out what is causing the absenteeism. And then that would happen in the first year of the biennium, and then have some funding provided for us to start some pilot programs. Because I believe that there are some schools out there that are doing some really great things to get their absenteeism down, their attendance rates up. And so let's find out where those nuggets of good solutions are, figure out how we might be able to scale that in some of our other communities. And I will also, I'm just going to just refute a point as well. Those students that return to school after they're 18, they actually hurt the graduation rate. They don't inflate the graduation rate because they're not counted. Our graduation rate is counted and reported on how many students we get graduating within the 4 years. Do they start as a freshman cohort and do they graduate as a freshman as a senior cohort? But I will say our GED rate, the general equivalency diploma, it's one of the highest in the nation. We're sitting at number 2. And any way that we can get our students across the finish line, whether it's when they return to school as a 19-year-old or get their general equivalency diploma, that's good for North Dakota. Let's make no mistake about that. I don't care if they get it when they're 19. Maybe they hiccuped and had a few stumbles when they were 17 or 18 or whatever it is. When we graduate our citizens with a diploma or a GED, that means they're contributing citizens to North Dakota. That's good for our economy.
Jason, a brief moment to respond to any of that if you want to, and then we'll move on to another question.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Hey, Jason, you've talked a lot about on the campaign trail student scores and concerns with student scores. What is your plan to increase student scores? I think generally nobody thinks our schools are perfect, but what would be your plan to raise those scores rather from where they're at right now?
The curriculum and the handcuffing of teachers to have to, teach a curriculum that is not good, that has to change. You're seeing a lot of schools across the nation which are actually going away from tablets. They're going away from having their phones in their hands. They're making them put them in a box. There's a lot of things going on out there that you're starting to actually see in North Dakota also. But the one thing you don't see is you don't see our Superintendent of Public Instruction at the forefront trying to talk about things like this. You're seeing it in the news after the school initiates it. And that's got to change. Because, I had a person who was a pretty high-profile person on the radio tell me the other day that if I would get rid of the tablets for the younger kids in school, that he would actually vote for me. That's where we're getting to. And what do you see from Kirsten? You see people from out of state, like Ted Dinnersmith, giving $15,000, hoping that he can get his stuff into this state. You're seeing over $100,000 raised by outside interests to try to bring their stuff into North Dakota and see how the kids do with it. We have to get a curriculum that's going to help our kids. I talked recently to a representative from Montana, and he said that he has 6 grandkids. And all of them are going to be homeschooled because the education system in the United States is broken. It's not just North Dakota. But, when Kirsten goes to these conventions all over the place looking for new ways to educate the kids, she's finding the same stuff that isn't working across the United States. And we have the ability to start our own curriculum here and to educate our kids on the basics, the reading, the writing, the arithmetics, and civics. It's amazing as I've gone around the state, the amount of people who've never read the Constitution before. Problems of Democracy was one of my favorite classes in high school. And people have never read the Constitution. Young people, old people, all of this stuff. It's very important to know where our founding fathers came from and to educate them on it. And, the one thing also is, I was talking to a person last night. They got 3rd graders doing these tests, and they're supposed to type up a paragraph. Cursive writing is one of the most important things where you use your brain and your arms and everything working together to do things. It helps you out in life to be able to do that. And we're finding out that they're not teaching cursive writing in North Dakota. You can't imagine how many people I've heard from that they don't even understand that their kids don't know cursive writing until they try to take their kids' first check in to the bank and the kids can't write their own names. I've heard that multiple times across the state.
So what I'm
technology, it's
let's
helping.
let Jason finish, and then Kirsten, you can go.
Yeah. I just said there's so many things that we can do that are basic to help the kids with, I mean, we have to learn how to survive first before we go to technology. And a lot of this technology has to be taken away at a young age. And that's where I'm at.
All right, Jason, Kirsten, go ahead.
So what I'm hearing Jason say is that he wants to take away local control because and a forced statewide curriculum. Because right now, our local school boards, in conjunction with the teachers and the administrators and superintendents at our local schools, decide what curriculum to use, what books to use. Right now, there's nothing prohibiting our school districts from teaching cursive, but there's also nothing forcing our teachers to teach cursive. And so that's what I hear him saying, is that he doesn't believe in local control. And if he comes into this office, he's going to have a statewide forced curriculum where every teacher is doing the same thing, using the same materials. And so I think I just heard him talk out of both sides of his mouth that we can't handcuff our teachers when in fact we're not. But then on the other hand, if he's the state superintendent, he's going to come in and force teachers to do what they need to do. And so I as a local school board member, I know that the curriculum that we needed to use in Mandan was very different. The examples and the teaching lessons that our teachers needed to use in Mandan was going to be very different than what would be happening in Red River Valley, because our geography and our access to different experiences is different in Mandan. And that's the beauty of local control, and it's something that the state has cherished for a long time. And I'm grateful for that local control. So I believe that the way that North Dakota has set up and set expectations of standards in math, standards in reading, standards in writing, standards in science and social studies, we decide as a state what we want our students to know and be able to do. And then it's up to our local school boards to determine what curriculum and what resources and what materials that they use. I want to come back to the state expectations and the honesty gap that existed when I first took office, and actually what other states are trying to do right now. Our North Dakota teachers come together and they write the standards. They write the expectations for all of the subjects that are written in, that are taught in our schools. When I first came into office, we weren't being very honest with our students and their families. We were telling them that they were more proficient, accomplishing more in our subject areas, particularly reading, writing, and mathematics and science, than they actually were. Right now, and our teachers came together and they set the expectations of what we were going to call advanced and proficient in North Dakota. And right now you see states like Oklahoma, Idaho, Wisconsin trying to lower those expectations so it looks like more of their students are accomplishing the goal of being proficient or advanced in those subject areas. We're not going to do that. We won't do that because our teachers came together and said, our students can achieve this. We have got great teachers with smart students and strong families in this state, and we know our students can learn to a very, very high level. I know your listeners can't listen. I use my hands a lot when I talk, and I'm raising the bar all the time. But that's why it may appear like we are not doing well, because it may appear that we dropped because we suddenly were honest with exactly how our students were doing. We raised that bar, and our teachers are getting our students there. Our students are getting themselves there. Every year since then, our scores and the number of proficient students have risen and risen. The pandemic, we took a hit. Absolutely we did. And we dipped down. But the last 2 years, we are trending in the right direction, and our students are actually performing as well or better. Incrementally, yes, but this takes time. So you have to have a plan. It can't be, I'm going to go in and our teachers are going to use this curriculum and that. That's impossible for 480, and nor should it be that way.
Jason, we'll give you a quick chance to respond, and then we'll move on to another question.
The reason I didn't interrupt Kirsten during that talk she just gave is because I wanted to be taped so people could listen to it again. Just recently, Bismarck lowered their cut scores, okay? So maybe you want to take a look into that, Kirsten, all right? The thing is, we talk about local controls. The only local control that we get is what the legislature allows. I've been talking about that for a long time. In 2010 to 2011, the North Dakota legislature passed a law to make CRT the curriculum, of the state. Okay. They also passed a law that if you get a 24 on your ACT, you get a $6,000 scholarship. Okay. 2015, nobody likes CRT. So guess what? The North Dakota legislature passed a law to make SEL the curriculum. How's that sounding for local control, Kirsten? Or that other people are making the curriculum besides the legislature? The North Dakota legislature has passed a law that said that a school can only have 50% of expenditures plus $20,000 on hand. Now, recently, they changed it to where you can only have 35% of expenditures plus $20,000 on hand. Where's the local control in that, Kirsten?
Kirsten, go ahead.
You got to start telling the truth.
Yeah, since he's asking you questions, I'll let you respond.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Well, first of all, no local school district can change the cut score for the state assessment. So they may have done some other things on their grading system, but again, that's why it's important to be an educator and to have an educational background, in my opinion. A grading scale is different than the North Dakota state assessment cut score. Those are two very different things. No local school district can change the cut score for a proficient level on the state assessment. And the legislature, the legislature setting the expectations for state money for their scholarship is completely within their purview. They did not set what a student should get on the ACT. They said, if you are going to get state money from a state scholarship, you are going to need to achieve these certain things. I'm happy that the legislature, with my tax dollars, are setting certain expectations for
taking away your local control. That's what they're doing.
It isn't local control for state money. They're spending state money. Local school districts have all sorts of scholarship funding.
Funding schools is a state obligation.
But this is a scholarship.
You got to tell the truth.
You're talking about two different things, Jason. You're talking about a state scholarship for higher education or an apprenticeship program or a trade school.
All right, sorry, go ahead, Chad. Well, I was going to ask another question, but if you want to follow up on that, Chad, go ahead.
No, I had another question. You go, Rob.
Okay. I wanted to ask about vaccines. Back in August, I reported, and I think other people reported as well, we got new numbers on kindergarten vaccination rates. Now, these aren't the only. We also report cohorts that are further down the line in the education system. But the kindergarten rates, I think, are the ones we look at because they kind of set the tone for how things are going to go for those students throughout. And our vaccination rates are falling. We have seen, I think from the pandemic era, we've seen a 3 to 4% decline in most of the required vaccination rates. We've also seen, going back to 2017, 2018 school year, we've seen basically a doubling in the number of religious or personal belief vaccine exemptions. So I guess, Jason, starting with you, is this something you're concerned about? And do you feel like this is a place where the superintendent's office has a role in order to ensure that these required vaccinations of our students are being fulfilled?
I think that parents have the ability to say whether the kids are going to be vaccinated or not.
Okay, Kirsten, go ahead.
So you're right on the vaccination rates. I often say, Chad has heard me say this in many meetings, education meetings, there are times where the Department of Public Instruction is the Batman, and our Batman mission is to educate students. And then there are often times where we have to be the Robin on the mission, and in my case, Batgirl. But we aren't leaders on every entity. And so I will tell you that we are great partners with the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Department of Health and Human Services are responsible for the vaccination rates. And so at any time that I can partner with our other state agencies, that's good for taxpayer monies. So what is the role of the state superintendent's office? I got the Constitution article in section wrong. It's actually Article 5, Section 2, that says that the only authority that the state superintendent has is the authority given to him or her by the legislature. So that's the authority that we have. That's the only thing that we have. But the other portion of this job is that it is my job to ensure that all laws, rules, and regulations are implemented in our schools. And so when we were having really low vaccination rates it was my job to go out to our local school district superintendents and say, hey, you are not reporting. Your reporting rate is 75%, and you've got to do better. And so they simply weren't collecting. If this child wasn't vaccinated, the law also says that schools must accept any student. They can't shut them out. And so our school districts are in a bit of a conundrum. So they're supposed to have vaccinated kids coming to school, and they can't shut their doors to any student. And so if they do, they're in trouble, legally at all sorts of levels. And so, but what I needed to enforce was they needed to do better at collecting the vaccination records. So our Health and Human Services had good information for them to prepare for any, pending outbreak, or which areas of our state were, more susceptible to a measles, mumps, and rubella outbreak. And so, yes, we did do that, and we had to work in concert with HHS. So my job at the state office is to ensure that our school districts are doing what they need to do, so our Health and Human Services have accurate information and records. I don't know again, it would take some more, I would say, vigilant authority that is given to us by the state legislature in order for us to do anything more than that.
Jason, you have any response to that?
I just have one question. I would like to know what the century code was that you were following when you threatened schools funding if they didn't follow the COVID rules.
So there was an executive order that came out, and it's my job to implement those rules. So
that was just an executive order. That wasn't century code.
Well, again, to the Constitution and your background in the American executive orders hold a lot of weight, and it's my job to implement those as well.
So another important issue that's facing education of the state is recruitment and retention of teachers. And so, Jason, to you, what do you think the state can, and this isn't just a state issue, right? This is a national issue as well, where we have people leaving the profession maybe a little quicker than we can replace them. So, Jason, what would your plan be to help recruit and retain teachers, to make sure classrooms stay in reasonable sizes, that our rural communities have access to the same in-person education as our urban locations? So how can you convince folks to go into the profession?
Well, I'm glad that you guys are starting me out with every question. So I do appreciate that very much. I'm just joking around. I'm just joking around.
Yeah.
I think teacher retention, that starts in school. Okay. A lot of the things that I grew up with, we had wonderful teachers growing up, but I can tell you what, we also had discipline in our schools. And so a lot of the people that I know that are teachers today got that idea when they were in school, and you can't start it early enough. Just like with me, with what I do for a living, that started in a younger age too. So we just have to get the information out there to help get people interested in academics. I like a lot of the policies where, if you go to school in North Dakota and you stay for so long, they could probably pay for the tuition and things like that. I don't have a problem with any of that as long as it brings more people to this state. I know, in the last year, pay has not been keeping up, because I understand that there was a 0.7% increase on an average for pay, which would make it that they're actually earning, 10% less than they did 5 years ago. And so we need to be able to keep up on all of this stuff. One of the things that I would push is to have the state more involved in the buildings. The buildings are an issue that was in the Constitution, starting with establish and maintain. They kind of got away from that. That's been a big problem. It's been a big bonding issue problem, with the school bonds that have to be passed to build a new school, do new construction. And so, if the school boards could just have a budget on what they're supposed to be doing, which is hiring and firing teachers and setting curriculum, that would give them, less pressure on their budgets and an easier way to help find teachers. But you see that these superintendents are always trying to work on building a new building or doing this or doing that. And actually, that shouldn't even be in their purview according to our Constitution. So that's the one thing that I've been trying to work with people on and get them educated on as I've been running for this office. Kirsten?
So thanks. That's a really important question, Chad. I'm going to go back a little bit. I want to just point out that I think I heard Jason say that he would not implement an executive order or law if he doesn't agree with it. And that just baffles me as the lead, as an elected official that is part of the Constitution, to simply, make a statement or ask a question of why someone would be following an executive order or legal, the law as it is passed is just baffling to me.
I need to break in here because Kirsten is not telling the truth. I asked her what century code she used to threaten school funding if they didn't follow the COVID protocol, the rules. That's all I asked. I didn't say I wouldn't follow it, and I don't think that that's right that you say that. So let's be honest here.
So teacher recruitment and retention. So I would agree that, I agree with Jason that our recruitment efforts start the day that our children walk into the kindergarten classroom. If that's a warm, welcome, inviting place for them to be in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, middle school, high school, that's a place that they're going to say, I want to work in. If it's not, then why would they, after they graduate, why would they want to go back to that environment? So that recruitment issue is that's a fair point. And I appreciate that. So that's number one. But in addition to all of that, there are so many things that go into play with not even recruitment, but then the important factor of retention. And so first I'll talk about recruitment. Recruitment it needs to be a profession that is viewed and valued by all of our communities and all of our state. It needs to be, when somebody says, I want to be a teacher, we as a state, every community, by community, every area of the state needs to say, that is fantastic. Thank you so much. That's a great choice. Much like we do when they say they're going into medicine, or we say that they're going into law, or they're going to be an engineer. So we as state citizens have a role that we can all play each and every day. That doesn't cost anything. Lift up your teachers, value your teachers, thank them, and let's make comments every day, all day. That's part of the work that we're doing with the Teacher of the Year celebration. It's what I do. I was just in West Fargo talking to some high school students that have chosen teaching as their career. I went up to UND. UND was hosting over 115 high school students that have declared that they want to have teaching. Let's talk to them. Let's thank them. Let's tell them that now is absolutely the best time to be a teacher. Let's remove the hurdles that are in their place of how much college costs. They want to be a teacher. Let's help them. The teacher apprenticeship program that we started with our IDEA dollars for just special education teachers. We started that program with Minot State University. We allow them to keep working as teacher paraprofessionals, and we pay for their college tuition, and they earn a job. We make that education available to them online so they don't have to pick up their family. They can stay working as a teacher's aide in Bowman, North Dakota, stay with their family, stay working in Bowman School, get their teaching degree, and then eventually their teaching license, and then they become a licensed teacher. We started that with our IDEA. It was so successful and so in demand. We worked with the legislature to get a $3 million appropriation that has become part of our base budget so we can scale that. And the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction was the only state education agency in the nation to apply for the U.S. Department of Labor dollars in a competitive grant. And we got $4 million for a registered apprenticeship program for teachers. Only state in the nation where all of the apprenticeship dollars are going for teachers. So that's the recruitment. What's the retention? The retention is salaries that are competitive with other occupations, good, safe working conditions, and a community that values and celebrates their teachers. That's the retention.
I think we have time for probably one more question, and it kind of ties into something you just said about having a safe environment to work in. We've heard issues, and I on my list of questions, I had both mental health and behavior listed, and I think these two are hand in hand. We are hearing from some school districts where teachers are having real problems with students who get violent at times, physically violent, and their efforts, struggles to restrain them in appropriate ways, and obviously mental health issues in schools. So, Kirsten, I'll start with you for once, since maybe we were picking on Jason a little bit too much. I'll start with you. What can be done? What has been done? What can be done in terms of addressing mental health and behavior issues in our schools?
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that question as well. It's a major and significant issue, and it is contributing to our previous question, the retention of our teachers, and that's why it's something that we need to address. When I was the assistant principal in Bismarck Public Schools, as we all know, assistant principals are delegated the task of dealing with most behavior issues. That's the role of the assistant principal. At the time that I was the assistant principal at two different schools in Bismarck, our grade schools were kindergarten through sixth grade. They've since moved sixth grade into our middle schools. But I will tell you, when I first started in that role, the majority of my discipline issues and behavior issues was primarily my sixth grade students that were spreading their wings. They were getting ready to go to middle school, pushing the envelope a little bit more, right? And that was good. That was part of their developmental behavior, and it was our job to redirect. By the time I left and came to this position, the majority of my behavior issues and the most conferences that I had with parents and students were kindergarten, first and second grade students. It was, and that's not just making decisions to push the envelope and test their boundaries. That's real emotional behavioral control issues. And so that is where, again, we have to partner with our Health and Human Services. We've been investigating and looking into this problem and the root causes for about 6 or 7 years now. Part of the governor's task force on recruitment and retention of teachers called that out and say, it's time for us to build the bridge between our schools and our Health and Human Services divisions within our local communities. We have a really great partnership at the state with the Department of Public Instruction and our Health and Human Services agency. We need to make sure that bridge is sturdy and built between our local school districts and our Health and Human Services divisions and zones within our local communities. There is my pet peeve is when someone says, that's not my job, or it's there if they want it. We can't say it's not our job, and we can't say, well, if they want the help, there's that office over there, that agency over there that can help them. We need to be very intentional and really begin to strengthen that bridge at our local level and require that our local school districts are partnering with our Health and Human Services and vice versa, that our Health and Human Services are saying, we don't go into schools. We need to have our schools being able to say, yes, come in, let's partner. Because at the end of the day, what we've been trying to do is we have been using state taxpayer dollars to hire social workers and school psychologists and hire them using general education dollars. That's taxpayer money. And we've been hiring people in our Health and Human Service zones, and we're hiring them away from each other constantly and consistently. That's a real problem. We need to make sure that bridge, it's all one pot. We're Team ND. We need to make sure that our Human Service Center and zones are know that part of their responsibility is supporting those local schools. And schools have to be open to saying, we don't need to hire these people. We need to reach out to the services that already exist.
Jason, your response.
One thing I never heard in there, maybe I just didn't hear it, but I didn't hear anything about the parents. Okay. I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me. Okay. My son was about a head taller than all the kids in his class. And they used to send me emails on a daily basis about what they were scared of with my son. My son would have never hurt a fly. Okay. But they were worried because he was taller than everybody else. And so finally they sent me an email one day, and it said that my son was breaking pencils. Okay. So I got a hold of the principal, and I had a lot of respect for our principal in Weimar. Great man. And I said to him, could you just explain a little bit of this to me? And he said, well, Kelly is breaking pencils in school. And I said, so what does he do with the pencils when he's done with them? I mean, does he stick out on people's arms, or what is he doing with them? And he said, well, we go and we grab them, and then we throw them in the garbage. And I said, well, who's paying for the pencils? And they said, well, you are. And I said, okay. I said, do you guys understand what's going on? This kid is bored in school, all right? He needs action. He's a young boy. He needs to do things. He needs to keep going. He's calling for attention by breaking the pencils, and you're giving him the attention by going over and grabbing them and throwing them in the garbage. Okay? I'm not making this a simple thing, but we have to involve the parents also. I'm with Kirsten. Hey, we can use Health and Human Services and all that stuff. But, if the parents got to take a day off and come sit in the classroom and see what their kid's doing, then that's what they have to do. Because we are trying to make it to where the teachers are actually the parents when they're in the school. And we can't do that. We can't do that at all. We have to involve the parents. And they have to know what the kids are doing. And they have to take care of that. And, my son got better and better and better, okay, as time went on. But there was some other issues also that I could go into, which I'm not going to embarrass my son on the radio forever, all right? But there were some things that I wanted to do, and after we got involved with this, I was able to take him to some of the help that he needed, okay? And the teachers actually told me that Kelly was getting better later. But without the parents' involvement, it doesn't matter how many North Dakota agencies you involve, the parents have to be involved. And I can't stress that enough. And so when you're talking about attention orders and stuff like that, I'm all for what Kirsten said, but we have to involve the parents also. And so there's a life lesson there that I can share.
Well, I think that's it. We asked for an hour from each of you, and we got almost an hour. We're coming up right on 60 minutes of recording. So thank you so much for coming on. I felt like this was a very good debate. I hope you both found it valuable, but certainly appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Can I say one thing, Rob? I appreciate you and Chad having the courage to have this debate, because no one else across the state had the courage to do it. I had many places tell me that they were going to do a debate for this, but none of them had the courage to do it. So I really appreciate it very much. And thank you, Kirsten, for also being on it.
Thanks, Jason.
All right, we'll end it there. Thank you so much for listening, and certainly more episodes. I'm going to actually be doing a roundup column with all of our debates from the election cycle, all the candidates, all the measures that we did. We'll put them all in one place for people to find them as you're making your decision about voting. If you haven't already, some of us have already voted. I voted already. So, but if you haven't voted already, hopefully it'll be a good resource for you. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Send me an email at rport@forumcom.com. That's forumcom with 2 M's.com. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening. Chad is an old man.